Hey, thanks for joining again, folks. This episode, we're going to install these A-pillar pods from customspeakerpods.com using these BT tweeters from Sundown Audio. Obviously, we're going to use our own equipment. We're going to tackle the stereo and anything that has to do with the wiring with the dash. I got a bunch of weird stuff going on in here that I'm going to install, just random this, that, and the other. Stay tuned. Enjoy the show.
This episode is brought to you by Megasound Car Audio. Megasound is the #1 source for Sundown audio products in the Nashville, Tennessee area. If you're in that area, check them out.
Alright, so we're going to go ahead and look over all the things we're going to put in the dash. I think this is most of it. There might be some other things. Anyway, so here's what we got going on. We've got these A-pillar pods. If you remember, we had Brandon from customspeakerpods.com, and we did the doors last time. So here they are right there. Don't mind my mess. A-pillar shouldn't be anywhere near as much of a pain as the door pods were. So we'll just go ahead and get those bad boys on. I'm going to probably, well, I know I will. We're going to go ahead and remove the A-pillar first, bring them on the table, and then install them. I want to make sure the orientation works with the dash, which I know it does, but I want to see kind of where it fits. So I believe you've got a couple inches to work with on your orientation. So there's that. And again, we're going to use these BT tweeters, and they will be installed on the SDX 90.2. So there's that. Now moving over, we've got this radio. And again, I want to thank customspeakerpods.com for those pods. Makes my life a whole lot easier. You can literally spend a whole weekend or more just trying to make something like this out of fiberglass. So that's a huge help right there. And they're not super expensive. Now moving over here, we've got the radio. Look how small that is now. Remember, these used to be super deep back when you used to use CDs. So this radio I got from Megasound in Nashville, Tennessee. Now when I reached out to Megasound about getting this radio, there was a little bit of a wait time. I know a lot of you have experienced this, especially install shops. It is really hard to get Pioneer radios or any radios at this point in time, especially double DINs, because everybody wants a double DIN or touchscreen, you know. So what they did was they went ahead and they got me the radio. I had to wait a couple weeks for it, and then they pre-wired the radio for me. Now, like I said before, I'm not much for people doing my own wiring, but they went ahead and they did it for me, and they did a fantastic job. Now, if you notice something weird here, there's this big blue wire. This is called speed wire. And this has 9 wires built inside of it. Now, if I was doing a standard 4-channel system, this would be the way to go. Using this wire is a non-conventional way to installing a 4-channel amplifier in a vehicle, but it's faster if you think about it. The way this works, and unfortunately I can't use this, but the way that this works is like this. I have an amplifier in the back of my vehicle. It's a 4-channel amp. And what I can do is I can take the 8 speaker wires that are here on this end. This end goes to the amplifier. Obviously you have to splice this and put it into your speaker outputs of the amplifier. And it goes from there back up front and attaches to the speaker outputs that would go to all the speakers in the dash area. That way you don't have to run individual wires to all 4 doors. Now in my case, I'm not going to be able to use this. And it was fantastic that they did this. I really liked it. And what I'm going to do is I'm still going to run this wire because this has my remote wire built into it. So I'll use my remote wire from the going to the Salt 1700.5. It'll go from here to down through this line to here. And the cool thing is, if I ever want to change up my system and maybe do all 4 doors, because right now, remember, we're just doing front stage. If I want to do all 4 doors, then I'll have the ability to do that in the future by having this wire already pre-wired for me. So that's cool. Now, one thing they did not wire for me, which I asked for after the fact, were the steering wheel controls. And This looks a little intimidating, but to be honest with you, it is not. There's a lot of wires, but you really only use, I think, 3 of them. And I've got all the instructions from Access right here that I printed off. It's vehicle specific. It should not be hard to tackle. Now we also have the antenna adapter, which all GM vehicles, the newer ones, need those. And over here we have the dash install kit. We've got the backup camera. And right here we got something cool that they just kind of threw in for me. This goes into your cigarette plug area, or you can drill a hole and make your own, or they give you this cool little install piece here. This has an HDMI and a USB 3 input, and that will go to the radio. Now, one thing they did not supply, which I'm not sure if they knew or not, was, so this right here is a standard HDMI cord, but the back of this radio has a micro HDMI input, so I'm gonna have to get an adapter for that. Now, if you look at the back of this radio, you've got a bunch of different things going on here. You've got your GPS wire, you've got the, I'm not even sure what that is, the micro HDMI, you got your microphone and your steering wheel control input. Now we're going to be using steering wheel control and mic and GPS. Down here you also have the wire for this bad boy right here. It's got all your inputs and outputs. And you got your power and ground and your speaker outputs. We won't be using speaker outputs from the radio because we have an amplifier. Now when it comes to our GPS wire and our microphone input, let's go ahead and show you what I've already done. Now a few weeks ago, I installed this backup camera slash dash cam system. It actually has a camera in the front, and there's a camera that I mounted on top of the third brake light. Now, when I did the installation for this, I already had the radio. I was just waiting to have time to do the actual radio install. Now, when I was installing this system, I had to run wires up through the headliner already, so I was already in this area. So I said, you know what, screw it. Since I have all this down, I'm gonna go ahead and wire in the things I need to wire in for my radio. That way I don't have to do all this over again. So right here, I put my microphone for my radio. That's the standard Pioneer microphone. Now, a lot of times I'll throw it up in this area, but since I was already up here, I put it right there. That's actually where the factory microphone is for the vehicle, for OnStar and such. So there's that, and I also ran my GPS wire and antenna right there on that corner. This one did not have a magnet to the bottom of it, which usually you would mount about right here and fish your wires down through. So I just set it right there, and that seems to work just fine. Now the wires for those, they run down this A-pillar, they come through, and they'll end up going right through where the stereo goes. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna tackle removing these A-pillars and get the speaker pods on there, mount them and see what they look like and see what I need to cut if I have to cut anything. All right, so here's your A-pillar and here's the speaker pod. And it goes something just like this. I'm gonna go ahead and remove this guy real quick. That way I can get the proper positioning of that pod. And we got, of course, son of a bitch. All right, so in order to remove this, I have to take the actual A-pillar off real quick and undo the connection for the speaker wire. I mean, I could just cut it. You know what, guys? I'm just gonna go ahead and cut that. There's no point in me removing the A-pillar and putting it back in just to fit this thing. And I'm never gonna use these again. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this. Alright, so now that I have the factory tweeter off, I can go ahead and position this. So what I'm gonna do is kind of see where this fits best. So it feels like I can go all the way up to here with it if I wanted to, but then that would leave a big hole there, and we don't want that. So I'm gonna bring this down to where it feels like it fits the best, which is right there. That feels the best for me. So now that I got it where I want it, I'm gonna go ahead and make a mark on my panel. I don't have a pencil. So there's my mark. So now I can go to the other side and I want to measure this, go to the other side and make sure that my where I'm going to position my pod is going to be the same spot. All right, now I got my position where I want my speaker pod to be. I'm gonna go ahead and pop this off, get the A-pillar out of here. And these are 10mm bolts that hold your oh shit handle there. Now I can go ahead and pry this bad boy off. And right here is our connection for our factory tweeter. I'm gonna go ahead and remove that. So now that my A-pillar is off, I can take the A-pillar to the table and work on my pods. All right, now that I have my speaker pod on my A-pillar where I want it to be, I'm gonna mark where the holes are gonna go. I would prefer using a pencil, but you know, sometimes you can never find a pencil when you need one, but you always find them when you don't need them. So this pen will work. Now I got my holes there, and I'm going to go ahead and drill out where I marked them. I'm going to put this pod on here and fit the speaker in there to see how it fits and see if I need to cut any of this out. All right, so I have my BT tweeter here. I've got 2 screws just kind of holding the pod in place. And I'm gonna fit that in there. Wow, actually, that's awesome. I actually do not have to cut the A-pillar at all. That fits perfect. That is just amazing. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and use my silver Sharpie and mark where the holes need to be for the tweeter. But before I do that, I wanna position this tweeter. There's a little bit of play, which is okay. I'm gonna go ahead and position this tweeter. So if you look, this little Sundown logo, it's hard to see on the camera, but the Sundown logo is on 3 sides. I'm just gonna position this where I feel would be the best. And maybe line it up with the bottom of this. Like one logo kind of parallel with this bottom. Just doesn't have to be perfect. So there's that. Mark my holes. And then pop that bad boy out. And now we can drill our holes out. All right, so the holes that I made are slightly smaller than the screw itself. That way it's basically just a pilot hole for your screw to bite into and your screw to take care of the rest from there. These are just machine screws, same ones we used on the other pods. So here I've got a roll of our Sundown 16 gauge wire. It is OFC and silver tin, so it'll never corrode, and it's fantastic stuff. I'm gonna go ahead and run this through this pod and get my speaker set in there, because it's going to be a little bit harder for me to set that, to get everything wired up while it's in the vehicle. So I'm going to pre-wire this, and when I get it in the vehicle, I'll just run my wires down the jam there. All right, so there is our BT tweeter installed into our pod, installed onto our A-pillar. Go put this in the truck and see what it looks like. All right, so there's the here's the passenger side, and I got the driver's side in over there. They fit perfect, no issues, no cutting. I'm actually surprised I didn't have to cut this because of the that tweeter sits so deep. But nonetheless, works out really well. Pretty quick to install these, honestly. I just have to put the bolts back in on the oh shit handle and call it a day on the A-pillars. That one doesn't have that handle, it just has a little, I think it's a 7mm screw that goes through there. But there we go. And I've got the wires ran down to my big mess of wires down here. And I'm not exactly sure where I'm going to install the SDX 90.2. But I think I might do it somewhere underneath the dash, or if I have room behind the radio. Well, I don't know. I don't think I should do it behind the radio because I still have to adjust the gain settings, so maybe not there. There's room down there. I don't know. I want to keep the 90.2 somewhere in the dash area. That way I don't have to run wires back to the under the seats. But anyway, so here's that. And the next thing we're going to tackle is the radio. All right, so not only am I going to change this radio out, but if you notice, the AC controls are starting to get worn out, and the buttons are. So I purchased this online. This is like, it was like $8, and there are stickers that go on here, and they're perfect fits. I made sure, and I did a little bit of research to figure out which ones were the best, and these seem to work pretty good. And so I'll be changing these out. I'm gonna do this off camera, but I'm gonna pull this whole thing out. That way I can fix these up. So I went and I installed the radio in the dash kit that you have to use for this vehicle. Now, since this is such a shallow design, you know, these kits come with these side pieces right here, and they're pretty deep for like a standard size radio that would have like a CD player. So I went and I cut that off to keep it, you know, pretty much flush with the back. And what that'll do, that'll help with clearance, because I'm going to have a lot of wires that come behind this radio, and anything to help with clearance back there will be a plus. So I'm going to go ahead and start running the wires behind the dash. I have a ton of wires. I'm probably not going to cover most of that on the camera, but I'll explain what I do after the fact. All right, let's talk backup cameras for a minute. So here's the camera system. It mounts, the mounts are right behind these two bolts for the license plate, and you can attenuate this bad boy however you want. I'm gonna have mine facing somewhat down, or maybe add a little bit more. I'll have to adjust that as once I get the camera actually set up, or the monitor set up. But I've got two cameras now. I got this one, which will be right here, and I got that guy on above the third brake light. So this one will go to the stereo, and that one up there goes to my mirror backup camera. Now to do the wiring, let's take a look. So I still have to tidy it up in here, but let me show you what I went to. Now if you look right here, move that out of the way, this actually tells you which wires are which. Now the center pin says that is the backup lamps. And so that's what I want to trigger and power up my camera. So I tested this green wire right here, which goes to the center pin, and this only turns on when your reverse lights are on. So I use this as my power wire. I soldered it, taped it up. Then I went right here for a ground wire, just bolted right to the frame. And here's my RCA. I'm gonna have to tape that up. I'm gonna tape all this up and zip tie it up out of the way. Wire loomed the RCA wire. It follows all the factory wiring. It goes all the way to the front of the vehicle. Make sure you follow the factory wires and it's not in the way of anything that's moving or anything that can get hot. So that wire runs across the driver's side underneath the vehicle along the factory wires, zip tied every 12 to 16 or 12 inches or so. And it comes up right over here. Comes up right through here, which I believe this is the parking brake cable. And it follows up through there. And I've got a big mess under here right now. And it comes up and goes up to the stereo. Now for the reverse trigger wire, I went right here. This blue wire that comes off of this top here, it's the second pin on the top right. I have two wires going to that. This one is for my mirror that has the reverse camera. This one goes to the radio to trigger reverse. And these will be zip tied and taped out of the way. And right here, I used my little stickers I got off of Amazon, and I redid the ones that needed to be done. I wiped it with alcohol, and then I used a paint pen, a black paint pen, which I got this idea from Cabe Sipes. I'm not sure if you guys know who that is, but he used to work for a Pit My Ride. But Cabe mentioned using a paint pen to fill in, which I can't show you now, but to fill in the areas that are green. That way the light only illuminates in the areas it needs to illuminate. So you sand everything, wipe it down with alcohol, set your stickers on as straight as possible. But before you do all that, you gotta make sure you use that black paint pen to get you to clear up all the green areas. Now right here, I've got a bit of a rat's nest I gotta clean up. I'm in the middle of, basically I can't put the radio in here until I've got all my wires ran, and there's a ton of wires. Got my RCAs, each RCA, there's 3 of them, 3 sets. And what I do is I mark them with tape. I have 3 sets of RCAs, so I've got 1 piece of tape, 2 pieces of tape, 3 pieces of tape, and then I tape the other sides the same way too. That way I can differentiate which RCA is which. Now all I gotta do is clean this up and get everything set up. Now on this piece right here, I did something pretty cool. I was able to get our salt base knob in there with a lot of sanding. Basically you gotta sand all the way around that little base knob, and it fits directly in this little pocket that GM leaves there that's kind of useless in my opinion. So I think it's a good spot for a base knob. And I did nick the corner right here. It's hard to see. Yep, I got the corner. Anyway, that's what happens. Now, if I was doing this for a customer's car, I would definitely swap this base knob out. But since it's me, screw it. This is the way it is. Check this out. So right here, you see we've got the USB 3 input. It's going to go to the radio, and the HDMI input. It's going to go to the radio. It's just here for extra, just in case I want to use it. We're about to start installing the radio itself, finally, after running all those wires. But I want to show you something that I did here. So this cable right here is a micro HDMI to a regular HDMI. This is a female end. And this will go to that piece that you see as sits on the dash, or in the front of the dash. And this piece right here is an adapter for USB-C to regular USB, and it will also go to that same piece that this goes to. It's in the front. Now, if you look what I did, I threw a little bit of E6000 You can do like just some kind of glue or silicone. And the reason why I did this, I see a lot of people with these, they'll use the right angle attachments for these, which I did not get, and I wish I did. But the reason for me putting a little bit of glue here and a little bit of glue there, or E6000 is what I used. The reason for that is because these like to wiggle and come out, and they can get pressed and turned, and I basically just put a little bit of glue there to keep it intact while we shove the radio into the hole. Again, this radio is pretty shallow, so there is some room behind it for wire, you know, the mess of wires that will be there. But just for added security, I threw a little dab of E6000, let it dry, and now I can go ahead and install this radio. All right, so I have a rat's nest here. I tried to clean up as best as I could. I still have to clean up some more. This is a lot of extra wire, but kind of, had I not had this blue wire that they already installed for me, I could probably shrink this down some and shove it back there, but there's a lot going on here. I've got some pockets I could shove some of this wire into, and we'll try to do our best here. Now I had to wire in myself the steering wheel controls. Now here's that module right there for steering wheel controls. And what I gotta do is I have to plug the radio in, turn my key on, and start tapping the volume key until this stops blinking. And that should sense everything and set it all up correctly. That way I can get everything in here and my steering wheel controls work. So I'm gonna do that first before I shove everything in here. All right, so we stopped flashing, and looks like we're good. Right here. All right, so now all of our connections are made, all the connections that we plan on using, and now I gotta clean this up and shove it in there somehow. All right, so I got the radio in here. My dash is cracked so bad right now, but it's the only thing that's really holding this dash and this stuff together, honestly, is the trim panel that kind of sits here over all this. That I really need a new dash, and I'm sure a lot of you who have the same vehicle have the same problem. That's why that dash pad was on here, but goodness gracious, it is just bad. Basically, this whole piece right here is not even held on by anything. It's just in place. So there's that. Unfortunately, if you wanted to change this whole dash, you would have to literally undo this whole top half, and that's a lot of work, guys. So right now, that's just the way it's gonna be. I'm gonna put the dash pad back on and pretend that that's not even there until the time comes where I actually need to replace it. So the radio's in, let's make sure it works. All right, so I'm not sure if I got it caught on camera, but when I first plugged this in and I was setting up the steering wheel controls, I also was setting up the mode for the stereo. There's two modes when you first initiate stereo to turn on. There is standard, and then there is network. Now, since I'm running a three-way system and not like a front-rear system, I'm doing what's called network mode. Network mode lets me differentiate the crossovers between the tweeters, the mid-range speakers, and the subwoofer. Let's go into settings and see if we can see what I'm talking about here. Now, if we look here, we've got, instead of front, rear, and subwoofer, I have now high, mid-level, low-pass filter, mid-level, high-pass filter, so you can do a bandpass setting on the VEX speakers. And then let's see, you should have subwoofer next. Yep, subwoofer's next. So I can set all these settings for my crossover points here on the radio and do, I have bandpass for my mids. I could do my tweeter settings, which I'm going to do probably 5,000-6,000 hertz, and then my subwoofer settings. That way I don't have to worry about trying to do everything on the amplifier. Basically, you run your amps on full. Now my SDX 90.2 is way down there under the dash, but basically I can still set the 90.2 up for safe mode, just in case something happens and my settings become defaulted again. I still have security for the tweeter, because you'll blow them real easy if you need to. If you'll blow them real easy if something happens. But I'll set everything here and let everything kind of run full on the rest of the amplifiers. Cool. Now, so I got my dash piece on. You can see I got the salt bass knob right here. That's obviously not on because it's not hooked up to the amplifier yet. I've got a mess of wires down there I got to handle next. Let's see here. So tweeters are installed, radio's installed. All the wires that go to the radio and to the dash itself are in and in place, zip tied, as clean as I'm gonna get it. It's done. Now I gotta focus on the next piece, which is gonna be the 90.2. I believe I'm gonna go ahead and do that on a separate video because I think this has taken enough time for my video. So that's gonna wrap up this video, guys. Radio's in, dash is all taken care of as best as it's gonna be. It's very vibraty at the moment. We got our tweeters in. Next is the 90.2 and the other amp, and I gotta run all the wires, all that good stuff. If you feel like you would do it a little bit differently, make sure you leave a comment below. If you like it, hit that thumbs up, share the hell out of the video. You guys have a good night. Take care.